The state legislature is currently debating a bill that poses a very important question. Here it is. Should young children, school kids, be able to talk about sexual orientation or gender identity in school?
The bill passed its first Senate committee this week, and it aims to prevent that. And it aims to protect parents' decision-making. But a flood of people packed those chambers to oppose what they call a "don't say gay" mandate at school, a place that becomes, for some, the only real support system they have. Michael Womack was one of those at the podium this week. He represents Equality Florida, but also bared a bit of personal history, hoping to convince senators on the Education Committee to oppose that bill.
And Michael joins us now from, I believe, from the west coast of Florida. Michael, welcome. We're glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me, and good morning.
Yeah. I watched Glenna was in the room. I watched your testimony on the Florida channel before the Senate Education Committee, and I found it very compelling. If you would repeat some of that, tell us why you find this bill to be onerous, and if it had been in place, how your life would have changed for the better.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it wasn't that long ago. I was still in school, and I remember laying in bed and staring into the darkness with tears in my eyes, praying that God would fix me and take away the pain that I felt. And I didn't feel like there was anyone that I could trust until teachers in my life saw the value in me that I didn't see in myself. And so I confided in them. This bill is dangerous. It's going to put kids at risk because they're not going to have the opportunity to talk to those teachers. And it's really, really unfortunate that this is being fast-tracked through the legislature. You
know, Michael, sitting in that room, I will just lay out there, I felt like I was listening to people who live on parallel but separate planets. And an understanding among everyone really is what's needed, I suppose, to come to some conclusion to this. But for the record, we invited a lot of the people who were supportive of this bill to join us today, and they weren't able. I would like to go to some of what Senator Baxley had to say when he presented the bill he's the bill sponsor, and presented it to the Senate committee. So let's listen to how he frames this bill.
When you start opening sexual type discussions with children, you're entering a very dangerous zone.
I think there could be clarity in the language to assure that we're not preventing students from feeling comfortable.
Okay, so that also was Senator Manny Diaz of South Florida, who was on that committee. And he frames a really interesting question. The bill, as written, says conversations, to your point, the no conversations, and parental choice is a great big part of this bill. But what they were talking about there, Senator Baxley was talking about curriculum. And the one thing everybody agreed on is that the wording of this bill is kind of vague and needs to be changed. So does that give you some sort of hope?
Frankly, no. This bill needs to be thrown out. The truth is Dennis Baxley is an anti-LGBT extremist. He's compared our community to drunks and drug abusers, and will never support a bill that does anything to affirm LGBT families. The other part of this is I don't think it has much to do with our community at all. This is just one part of Governor DeSantis and the Republican Party's legislative agenda. They're trying to build basically build a campaign platform on the backs of our community and attacking us. So that's what this is really about.
Okay, so, and I appreciate your perspective, but if you read the bill is about parents' rights, and any parent with a child in school can be on board with parents' rights. And one of and I just want to challenge the narrative because that's kind of what we do here. So there's a woman named January Littlejohn who spoke as well, one of the very few people to speak in support of this bill. And her story, very briefly, is her daughter is transgender and at school found support, found services, found people to help her who I guess the daughter didn't think would at home. And the school did not tell Mrs. Littlejohn or her husband about their daughter. She felt left out of decision making. Can you put yourself in her shoes and see why a parent's rights at school would be something parents would want to see in statute?
Mm-hmm. Look, I understand sort of where they're coming from. look, these services have to be in place to protect kids. Kids often don't feel safe in the home environment, and so they have to confide in teachers because it's the only support system that's available for a lot of folks.
Yeah. Michael, the House sponsor of the similar bill made a point of saying that after school clubs, organizations like Gay Straight Alliance or any kind of a club where kids can talk about sexual orientation, gender identity, these things, that this bill would not prevent that. So that's an upside, is it not? I mean, if kids can talk about it in other settings in school, is that enough? And if it's not, why isn't it enough?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think this bill is about stigmatizing the LGBT community, and it's trying to, really chill efforts to create inclusive schools, and it's trying to scare people into not having these conversations. So I really don't see an upside to this bill at all. I think we need to throw the whole thing out.
Seeing as that's not likely to happen realistically, I want to ask you about it, and I actually discussed this with Senator Chevron Jones, who is the vice chair of that committee, who is an openly gay man who talked about his 3-year-old nephew who had a lot of questions and deserved to be answered. And that was an interesting portion of the committee meeting. But the language in the bill that we had mentioned needs to be changed. Everybody sort of said that on both sides. And if the language changes and doesn't match the House bill, this bill goes nowhere. Do you think this might be some kind of effort to show the governor, for some lawmakers, they're trying to do what he wants and yet not do what he wants?
I'm not sure. Honestly, I wish the Republican leadership would clue me into their decision making. I'm sure this would be going a lot differently. But I'll tell you this, we really hope the clock runs out on this thing and we don't see a floor vote.
Michael, I know that part of what Equality Florida does is look at the wider ramifications, and there has been an effort in a few Florida school districts to take books out of school libraries that some parents have objected to, like the novel Beloved by Toni Morrison. This, I find, frankly, a disturbing trend. What is your take on this?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I also want to note that between this and the book banning bills that are equally as concerning, frankly, it sort of puts us in a unique position where, our families are not, perverted, right? Like we are people, we are valid. And I think that there is often confusion between sexual orientation and gender identity and, intimate conversations about sex. LGBT families are valid and they need to be celebrated and supported in our school systems.
That's a
and
good
of course
point.
Through the books.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but a good point on which to end. We're out of time. Michael Womack, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.